There are places in the world that feel like fiction, as if nature wrote them with more imagination than science could explain. The Namib Desert is one of those places. Sprawling along the Atlantic coast of Namibia, it is the oldest desert on Earth, silent, timeless, and alive in ways that are almost mystical. I came here with a plan, a solo overland expedition, camera in hand, to document one of the most alien landscapes on the planet. What I didn't plan for was to get lost in it and find something far more valuable than directions. Subscribe for more adventures. Day 1. Into the Red Sea of Sand. My journey began in Windhoek, Namibia's capital, where the city's bustle ends quickly and the wilderness begins abruptly. I drove south in a rented 4x4, passing isolated towns and sun-scorched plains, the road stretching like a ribbon into oblivion. After nearly 8 hours, the red sands of Sossusvlei came into view, immense dunes that glowed orange under the late afternoon sun. Dune 45, one of the desert's tallest and most iconic dunes, stood like a massive wave frozen in time. I parked at the base and began the climb before sunrise the next morning. The sand was cool beneath my boots, but each step was a battle as my feet sank deeper with every move. Reaching the crest, the entire desert unfolded beneath me, ridges of fiery dunes as far as the eye could see. I felt small, insignificant, but also completely present. I descended into Dead Vlei, a stark white salt pan scattered with the dark skeletons of 900-year-old camel thorn trees. The trees, though long dead, stood untouched by decay, preserved by the dry air in perfect, eerie stillness. I flew my drone overhead, capturing the desolate beauty that looked more Martian than earthbound. That night, I camped under the stars and reviewed the footage. It was otherworldly, but I hadn't seen anything yet. Day 2. Ghosts of the Coast. The next day, I made my way north toward the legendary Skeleton Coast. The desert changed as I drove, less red, more pale gold. Wind-carved rocks and forgotten valleys framed the landscape. The route was empty except for the occasional springbok or oryx darting across the gravel plains. By mid-afternoon, the Atlantic fog began to roll in. It arrived like a slow-moving tide, enveloping the dunes and cooling the heat of the day. This fog, known locally as Kasimbo, is the lifeline of the Namib. Plants, insects, and even reptiles have adapted to drink it through specialized bodies and behaviors. On the coast, I found the corroded remains of a shipwreck jutting out of the sand like a rusted fossil. It was once a fishing trawler, now nothing more than twisted metal and rotting wood. The bones of whales and seals lay scattered nearby, reminders that this coast was once, and still is, a graveyard. There's a stillness here that is not peaceful, it is overwhelming. You feel it in your chest, like something ancient is watching. Day 3. Among the Himba. I turned inland again, making my way toward the Kunene region, where the mountains meet the desert. Along the way, I encountered Elia, a local guide who had grown up in a Himba community nearby. He offered to take me to meet his family, and I jumped at the chance. The Himba people are semi-nomadic herders, known for their ochre-covered skin and intricate hairstyles. They live in harmony with the harsh environment, relying on ancient knowledge and spiritual practices passed down through generations. At the village, I was welcomed with quiet curiosity. Elia translated as I spoke with the elders and watched the women grind red ochre into a fine powder, mixing it with butterfat to create otji's paste, which they applied to their skin and hair. It acts as sunblock, insect repellent, and a symbol of cultural identity. That night, I joined them by the fire under a canopy of stars. The sky in the Namib is unlike anywhere else. The Milky Way burns white, and you feel as if you're floating in space. The elders shared stories of spirits in the wind and ancestors that walk the dunes. I didn't understand every word, but I felt every one of them. Day 4. Deep in the dunes. Re-energized and inspired, I set out to document some of the lesser-known regions of the Namib, areas untouched by tour buses and Instagram filters. I followed a faint track deeper into the desert, passing strange geological formations and clusters of life that seemed impossible in such a barren place. The desert began to change again. Towering sand mountains gave way to gravel plains and salt flats. The color shifted from fiery red to dull beige, and honestly, the sky seemed more vast, bluer, but lonelier. My goal was to reach a remote outcrop where I hoped to film the fog cresting over the dunes at sunrise. That night, I camped alone under an overhang, watching the stars through the netting of my tent. I fell asleep to the howl of distant jackals and the low rumble of shifting sand. Day 5, lost. When I woke before dawn, the fog was already spilling over the dunes. It was exactly what I had hoped for. A ghostly waterfall of mist tumbling into the desert. I packed quickly and drove toward it, eager to find the perfect vantage point. And then, somewhere between awe and ambition, I took a wrong turn. The track disappeared, buried under wind-blown sand. My GPS began to flicker, then failed. I tried to backtrack, but the dunes had changed shape overnight. My compass pointed aimlessly as if the earth itself had stopped spinning. I was alone, completely and utterly lost. At first I panicked. The reality of the situation hit me hard. I was in one of the most inhospitable places on Earth, with limited supplies and no signal. But I remembered what I'd read and what Elia had said. The desert gives nothing, but it teaches everything. I made camp under a small rock outcrop, shielding myself from the brutal sun. I rationed water and food. I marked the sun's position and prepared to walk during the cooler hours. Day 6. The rhythm of survival. The desert has its own pulse. You start to feel it when everything else is stripped away. That morning, I set out walking just after 5 a.m., before the heat could trap me again. I moved slowly, scanning the horizon for signs of movement or tracks. The silence was immense, so loud it throbbed in my ears. But then, I began to notice the survivors. A fog beetle, tilted upward, collecting droplets of mist on its smooth back. A pair of ostrich tracks winding between two dunes. The twisted leaves of a Welwitschia mirabilis, a plant that lives for over 1,000 years and grows nowhere else on Earth. The Namib is a paradox. It looks dead but teems with life. It looks still but is constantly shifting. It feels endless, yet every grain of sand is part of a pattern older than civilization. By midday, I found a high dune and climbed it to survey the land. That's when I saw it, a glint in the distance, a dust plume, a vehicle. Day 7, rescued and reborn. It was a wildlife research team tracking a herd of desert elephants. They welcomed me aboard, shared water and food, and offered the kind of calm I hadn't felt in days. I hadn't been dangerously far from help, but in the Namib, even a few miles can feel like another planet. That evening, I rode with them to a temporary camp. As we drove, I spotted the elephants, massive, quiet, and surprisingly agile, navigating sand dunes with the grace of dancers. These animals had evolved to survive in the same harsh world that had just humbled me. Sitting by their campfire, the researchers told me stories of Namibia's hidden biodiversity: ghost frogs, barking geckos, sidewinder snakes, and even lions that roam the dunes in search of prey. The Namib wasn't just ancient, it was alive. Day 8. Leaving the desert. I returned to Windhoek by plane, looking down over the desert from above. From that height, it didn't look menacing. It looked like art. Every ridge, shadow, and ripple in the sand was part of a masterpiece sculpted over millions of years. I had come here for a travel video, for content, for adventure. What I left with was something far deeper: a changed mind, a quieter heart, and a humbling reminder that even in the age of satellites and smartphones, there are still places on Earth that cannot be controlled, only respected. The Namib Desert is a place of paradoxes. It is ancient, yet constantly evolving. It is harsh, yet filled with life. It is silent, but it speaks, if you are willing to listen. Getting lost in the Namib wasn't a failure. It was the purest form of travel, unpredictable, uncomfortable, and deeply transformative. It forced me to slow down, observe, and confront both fear and awe. If you ever find yourself drawn to a place that seems too far, too quiet, too strange, go. Let it strip you of certainty. Let it challenge your assumptions. Let it change you. I will return to the Namib one day, not to conquer it, but to listen to it again. Subscribe for more adventures. Happy travels.